We're going to be talking about multiplying and dividing fractions, right? Last lesson was about adding and subtracting. This one will be about multiplying and dividing. So, quick question, 4 times 2 or 4 groups of 2, what does that look like? Well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 groups, and in each group there contains 2, right? If I take 4 times 1/2, or 4 groups of halves, how many do I have? I have 1, 2, 3, 4 halves. So 4 groups of halves make 2 wholes, right? We can see that here. This and this would give us 1 circle. This and this would give us 1 other circle. The product is smaller than 4, right? So when you're multiplying a whole number by a fraction, you're going to get something smaller. So what does multiplying fractions actually mean? So we're going to represent 1 over 4 times 1 over 3 with a diagram. Okay? So what I did is we broke it down into quarters. So this is where the blue is. So this is broken down into 4 columns, and on the height here, I broke it down into thirds. There's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. So we see we've kind of essentially made a grid. So if I represent 1/4, which would be this shaded part in here, and I represent 1/3, which would be this shaded part in here, where do they overlap? Well, they overlap in this corner right here. Now, how many parts are of this big grid that we've broken it up into? Well, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So there are 12 squares that we've created, and they overlap in one of them. So 1 over 12. So we have 1/4 plus 1/3, times 1/3 would give us 1 over 12. Bigger fractions here, we have 8 over 9 times 3 over 4. Okay, so on the green side here, I've broken them down into 9 columns. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. On this side, I've broken it down into quarters. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So in green, I simply occupied 8 of the 9. So I occupied all of this with green, all of this with green, all the way until I've completely occupied 8 of the 9. On my side here, with 3/4, I occupied what I've broken up into quarters by placing the purple dots, right? So you can see in these 3 rows are only where the purple dots reside. What we're trying to figure out now is how many spaces do both the green and purple dot take up? Well, how many are there now in total? Well, I have 4 down here and I have 9. So I've created 36 squares in total. And how many of them occupy both a green and a purple? Well, there are 24 of them if we were to count that out. So if I was to multiply 3 over 4 by 8 over 9, I end up getting 24 over 36 as a whole. So there's 2 ways that we can multiply fractions here, right? Always change mixed numbers into improper fractions first. The first method we could do is simply multiply across the top and then across the bottom, and then reduce to lowest terms afterwards. So in this case, 8 times 3 gives me 24, 9 times 4 gives me 36, and then we start to reduce. I can divide these by 2, so it gives 12 over 18. I can reduce these further, it gives me 6 over 9, and I can reduce them to 2 over 3, which would be the lowest term. The second way, or second method that we could do this, which I encourage you to do because it saves a lot of time and space, divide the numerator and the denominator by any common factors, basically reducing it first. Right, so here we reduced it afterwards. We're going to reduce it first. Then multiply the top and bottom, multiply top and multiply the bottom. So I have 8 over 9 times 3 over 4, same one as above. I'm going to zoom in here. If you see that, I'm going to take 8 and 4. What is the common factor between 8 and 4? Well, I can take 4 out of both 8 and 4. When I take 4 divided by 4, I get 1. When I take 4 out of 8, I get 2. So I've reduced this to 2, and I've reduced that to 1. For 3 and 9, I can take out a common factor of 3. 3 divided by 3 gives me 1. 9 divided by 3 gives me 3. So now I've simply reduced this to 2 and 1 and 3 and 1. So now that I'm going to restate this, as my new multiplication of fractions. 2 times 1 over 3 times 1. And then we go ahead and multiply across. 2 times 1 is 2, 3 times 1 is 3. A couple more examples here, or a few more examples. We have 2 and 3/7 multiplied by 3 and 4/5. Got to change it to improper first. So that's the same as saying 17 over 7, right? 7 times 2 plus 3, times 19 over 5. I can't reduce 7, 19, 5, and 17, so I'm going to have to go to our first method that we talked about. Multiply the numerators. 17 times 19 is 323. And the denominators, 7 times 5 gives me 35. Fourth example, I have 7 over 9 times 2 and 1/4. So I got to change this first. So I have 7 over 9 times 9 over 4. Okay, now I can reduce 9 and 9. I can take 9 out of both of these. I'm left with 1. So all I'm left with is 7 times 1, which is 7. 1 times 4, which is 4. Fifth example, 4 times 5 over 6. Now, when we have a whole number of 4, it's the same as writing it as over 1. So we have 4 over 6 times 5 over 6. Pardon me, 4 over 1 times 5 over 6. Well, I know that 1 times 6 is going to give me 6. 4 times 5 is going to give me 20. And then I can reduce it down to 10 over 3. If you saw that you can take out a 2 of both this numerator of 4 and this denominator of 6 and reduce it to the 3 immediately, you could have skipped that step. Either way is acceptable. Now we're going to talk about dividing fractions. So 10 divided by 2 means how many times does 2 go into 10? So the example that I'm going to have represent here, dividing a fraction, 2 divided by 1/2. So when I have 2, so here's one piece and here's the other. So this is 1 and then this would be 2. I'm dividing it into halves. So I divide those into halves. So how many halves do I have? Well, 2 divided by 1/2 gives me 4. So how many halves do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, so this would just be the visual representation of what 2 divided by 1/2 would look like. Again, this might help too. When we have 8 divided by 4, we have 4 in here and 4 in here. How many groups do we have? Well, we end up getting 2. So divide 8 into groups of 4. There are 2 groups of 4 in 8 total. 8 divided by 1/2, so we take 8 wholes and we cut them in half. How many halves do we have now? Well, divide 8 into groups of 1/2. There are 16 groups of 1/2, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. So the quotient actually gets bigger if you picked up on that. 8 divided by 1/2 gives me 16. So to divide by a fraction, we flip the fraction we are dividing and then multiply, right? So this is just the understanding as to why. Here's how we're going to put it into practical use. So we see a couple different things. We could see fractions that look like this, which is really messy to look at. But all we're really doing, 4 over 7 divided by 2 over 5, I'm just going to rewrite that. So my orange sticker comes over here. 2 over 5, I'm going to flip it like we've been told to up here, which becomes 5 over 2, and multiply it. So it becomes 4 over 7 multiplied by 5 over 2. The other way we could see it, 4 over 7 divided by 2 over 5. That one's a lot easier to see, that we just go ahead and flip the 5 and 2 around. So it becomes 4 over 7 multiplied by 5 over 2. Right, so we have our examples here. 2 over 5 divided by negative 1 over 8. Well, I know that we need to flip the fraction that we're dividing by. So this becomes 2 over 5 times negative 8 over 1. Now, we just go ahead and multiply these fractions together. 2 times negative 8 is negative 16. 5 times 1 is 5. Last example, 9 over 11 divided by 2. 9 over 11 stays. If I'm going to switch the sign to multiplication and flip the fraction, remember, this is the same as over 1. Over 1. So if I need to flip that, I flip it to 1 over 2. So now I have 9 over 11 times 1 over 2, which gives me 9 over 22. So quick summary, when adding or subtracting fractions, find common denominator, then add or subtract the numerator. When multiplying fractions, reduce first, and then multiply across the top and bottom. When dividing fractions, flip the second or the bottom fraction that you see, and then reduce and multiply.